that in there. This week, as I was just hang out at breakfast, I do my devotions, and then sometimes I'll surf Facebook just to see what's going on with people's lives just a little bit. But I was going through just some Facebook posts, and I ran across a post from Seth Brisker. He's one of our pastors in our district. He's actually pastoring a revitalization project with Chris Dyer helping him and supervising him. He's revitalizing a church. And he was lamenting on there about how sometimes he wishes would go back to the old days. In the old days, pastors used to change churches about every 4 years. Do you folks remember that? You know, that was back in, I remember that as a kid, 60s, 70s, even into the 80s. It was a revolving door on the parsonage. I mean, people were just coming and going. That's why pastors didn't buy houses a lot of times, because they were in and out so fast. So the average tenure of a pastor is about 4 years. And so the old pastor would go, move on. A new pastor would come in, and Seth was lamenting that he goes, sometimes in this revitalization, I sort of wish I could just move on. And he's been there, I think, about 2.5, 3 years now at the work that he's doing. And it's nice just to escape all the problems and, go on to the next place, leave them for the next guy. As I read through his post, though, I got thinking about my own experience, and I responded to his post, because I remember this as a kid. When I was growing up, I was at Shiloh Wesleyan Church, and if we have some Shiloh folks online, good morning, because they're online. Lisa Knepp, you're sometimes online. My brother and sister-in-law and brother and sister-in-law, they're online. So good morning, Dave, Jerry, Mark, Becky, if you guys are online. Who else? Jason Cochran, you're usually online. Good morning. So shout out to all the online people. But I remember we had, in my 18 to 20 years at Shiloh, we had 5 different pastors in my growing up years. I mean, they just came and left. And the pastor in my junior high and senior high was the pastor who stayed the longest, Barry Fawcett, who married Michelle and I. And he was there for 8 years, and he was considered a long time, stayed too long pastor. So it's just amazing how much people came and left in the church, in the pastor round anyway. Another thing that I was taught in my pastoral training is that the people of your church are your congregation, and they're not to be your friends. You need to find your friends somewhere else. The congregation's your congregation, because you have to lead them, and you can't be friends with people you're leading, because sometimes you have to call them on the rug. Sometimes, you're going to go a different direction they want to go. So you don't want to make friends of the people in your congregation, because you're the pastor and you're called to lead. As I was processing all of that, I got thinking, I'm also processing evangelism. I've been talked the last couple Sundays about that a little bit. I'm going to be thinking about that a lot on my sabbatical. I began to realize the process of evangelism is a long-haul term. It's not a short game, it's a long game. And it takes time to build into somebody's life. It used to be when I was a kid, any of you ever went door knocking? I went door knocking, so we would start a church, we'd go knocking on doors, and you present the gospel. And it was interesting because you could knock on a door, you could present the gospel, you might find somebody that would actually accept the gospel, they would accept it, they'd accept Jesus, and they'd start going to church. It was bing, bang, boom, simple process, quick process, and you moved on to the next door. Nowadays, that doesn't work. Nowadays, it's a long-haul process. It takes time to be with somebody. It takes time to build a relationship and build trust, to build friendship. And I was thinking, if pastors are moving on every 4 years, they don't even build enough time to present the gospel to people in their own congregation, let alone the community. And then they're gone. They're on to the next group. Well, as Michelle and I got into ministry, I sort of bucked the process the whole way along. I just didn't think some of this was right. And in most of the places that we've went, we've become good friends with people in the church. We consider you some of our best friends are here. I've built good friends in the community as well. It wouldn't be easy for me to just pick up and move on. It would take a lot, because we're friends, and you're my family, you're my church family, and there's people in the community that I'm good friends with that I hope one day will find Jesus Christ, and they're my good friends. So this idea of just moving on all the time just doesn't make sense to me. And also, Michelle and I, just for whatever reason, we tend to get somewhere and we just stay there, because we found out that moving's a pain in the... Anybody move? It's a pain. We don't like moving, so we just sort of tend to stay places. So we've been in ministry, 36 years now? something like that. We've only pastored 3 churches. We were at West Union for 7 years, Oakdale for 12 years, and we're moving up to about 13, just finished 13, going into our 14th year here with you guys. So June 12th is when we hit the 13-year mark, so we've been hanging out here for a while with you folks as well. Well, today is my last Sunday with you for a while, not a long while, just for about 7 weeks or so. And we're going to just go out and scout, may not even do church a little bit, just take a break and rest and read. I have a couple books that I've been wanting to work on and actually work towards getting published, so I'm going to be working on that as well. But on this last Sunday, I ended up with a few more Sundays than I thought because of all the surgery stuff and that all getting bumped around. And I ended up getting into the series, Why Church? And so I'm going to wrap up this series this morning. And we've looked at a lot of different stuff, like how did the church get birthed? How did it even come about? Why is it here? We saw that its foundation was on the Apostle Peter's confession of Jesus Christ. And Jesus built his church on that confession, and it birthed out of Judaism. Last week we saw that how it's shifted in its worship style. Literally, what we're doing this morning is different. And now this morning I want to wrap this up, and I rearranged the chairs to help us implement these 3 ideas that I want to get across to you this morning. Idea number 1, church is community. Church is community. That's strange for us in our culture because we do not identify religion as much in our culture anymore as we used to. Even 40, 50 years ago, you might be part of Cleveland, but you were part of a segregation of Cleveland that was Catholic, Polish Catholic, Baptist. Even within our community, we're still segregated religiously as well, but that's not true anymore. But I still think church is community and should be the center of community life. Idea number 3, home is the center of spiritual life. It was, and I think it still should be. And idea number 3, Christ is center, or should be center, of the church. So let's jump into this first idea, church as community. The way that I arranged the chairs this morning emphasizes that concept. Instead of looking at the stage and the screen and the worship team up there, we're looking at each other, but we're looking through Jesus Christ, which we're going to talk about a little bit more a little bit later. But we're all centered around the communion table, and we're all centered together looking at each other. Right now, you're all still sort of looking at me, but you can easily glance out your eye and see so-and-so picking their nose over on the other side of the sanctuary. Yeah, just be careful, because somebody might see you this morning. I pushed in on this a little bit last week, but I think it's fun to discover, by sitting in a different arrangement, some of our church heritage. Now, eventually, we moved to Shakespearean theater. That came about. People started to have money. They started to go to the theater, and the church said, oh, that's a cool idea, good way to set the church up. And so they rearranged the seating because the churches individually were growing, and so they set it up in a Shakespearean theater style, which is an audience sits in this large group area, and then we face a stage that entertains us, and then the people up there entertain us. We come in, we're entertained, ha-ha, hee-hee, oh, sad, cry, whatever, worship a little bit, and then we just walk quietly back out, sort of uninvolved in what's really going on beyond the point of being a spectator. So it's sort of interesting. I was processing this. Humanly, we intrinsically understand this. I want to show you a couple pictures of some government offices. So whoever has the little boop, 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 let's go. This is the House of Representatives. It is not set up in Shakespearean theater. Now, there's a lot of representatives, so there's a lot of seats in there, but they're set up in a round so they can sort of see each other. There's still sort of a front that's leading stuff, but they see each other. Let's go on to the Senate. Senate's smaller, and so it's set up even more so in a round where they're working together. And then I looked this up. I went over to the New York United Nations building and took a gander at this. These are the different assemblies within the United Nations. So this is the Security Council. Isn't it interesting? They're set up in a round where they're working together and talking together. Let's go on the next one. The Economic and Social, they're sort of set up in a U or a C, but a U where they're looking at each other, being able to talk to each other. Let's go on. The trustee council, same concept. They're set up in a U. And the last picture, this is their general assembly. This is the most like Shakespearean theater. And this is where they just make general announcements to all the nations. So every nation in the world has a seat there with their representative, and they just are making general announcements, not doing any work here. When they go to do work, when they go to do life together, even the UN breaks down into small circles. Even our government breaks down into small circles where they're doing life. They're talking back and forth. It's sort of interesting. When we have a board meeting here at the church, we do not meet in here with me up on the stage preaching at the board. We go into a table in the kids' life room. We sit around the tables and we talk about the business of the church together. The very way in which we sit sets our expectations for what is to come. Why would you think worship would be any different? When we come into worship and we're seated in a theater fashion, we're coming in expecting a good show to take place in which I'm going to drop my ticket money into that little plate they pass around. And if it's a good show, I might put a little more in. If it's a bad show, I might be a little stingy on that. We're going to listen to what's going on up front with musicians and a professional speaker, and then we're going to just slide out after being entertained back into the world and into the community. But when you come in and you sit in a U shape or a semicircle, it naturally changes expectations of what is to come. And naturally, you already jumped into it this morning by speaking out during the service, just on your own. It's sort of interesting. It focuses less upon what's happening up front, and it focuses more on the community and what's going on here. So with that being said, as a good synagogue leader, I'm going to ask you to just talk together, not to me, talk to one another. What do you think about this morning? When you came in, what was your thoughts? What entered your mind? What did you like? Be careful about sharing what you don't like, because we can go down that road. Leave that for this afternoon. Take that up with the board, because I'm out of here. But let's talk. What hit you this morning? What did you feel when you came in? How did it change your expectations of worship just being in here like this? Go ahead. Let's talk back and forth. Go ahead. Talk. It's unusual. All right. What was that, Caleb? You get to watch what I watch on Sunday morning. Well, they're checking out. They're just going to go talk in the hall. What else? What else struck you? I can't imagine. I heard comments, so I know you had more to say than what you're saying right now. Yeah, everybody knows who's late. A lot of people, not a lot, several spoke about something else and where it's located. I don't want to be in front of that. The camera. Where's the camera? Where's the camera? Where's the camera? Okay.
I like that we're closer to each other and that we're less scattered and we're actually near our brothers and sisters rather than one over here and one there and scatter all out.
Now you can see everybody's shoes.
You know, I felt they were singing with us. Or we were, I felt like they were singing with us. We weren't singing with them, they were with us because we were all singing this way. This way. Does that make sense? Because the sound's coming this way? I just sort of felt that. There was people over here singing. I heard you folks over here.
You know, I think when you're on the stage and you're worshiping, when you do that, it's more like you're worshiping than trying to entertain. You know what I mean? Or trying to do that part. It's a different experience.
The chairs will get moved back. We won't leave it this way forever. Well, I don't know. I'm leaving, so it's your problem. I told Vince, if you want the chairs different, then this week you need to move them. When the chairs go back, what do you think we need to take with us from this morning? Does that make sense? We move the chairs back. Do you have a thought? You know, I need to keep this in my mind. I need to think about this. When we did it like this, it was just so different. Oh, I'm done after church, so I don't have to worry about attendance. Like, attendance tomorrow will be a booger. Like, attendance, because I take it by, I know where everybody sits. And it's like, where was who? And attendance. Yeah. Mm-hmm.
I like looking at people's faces instead of the backs.
I'm just looking at the cross.
True, I couldn't move that. Put another one up there. Oh, I could have put a cross on that. Anything else that you would take away? Mm-hmm. That's interesting. We don't do small groups in a theater setting. We do small groups in a table, around chairs, around a picnic table. Let's go on. Home is center. Oh, man, I don't have a clock. You guys don't probably see it on Sunday mornings. We have a clock and all the worship teams singing off this back here, but the clock ain't up there. I guess we get to go for a long time. Oh, I do have a watch. All right. But home is center of spiritual life. For most American Christian world, one's entire spiritual life is wrapped up in the church. And as the church health goes, so goes the spiritual health of all of the people within the church, unfortunately. And I don't think that's a great system. A great spiritual system takes place when the followers of Jesus Christ do life together. Not just worship, not just church activities, but they start to do life together. It's one reason why small groups are so important in our culture today. We do life together. We do activities together. We go places together. We play together. We work together. We do church stuff together. It's interesting, that's the way the church sort of began. Yes, there were evangelists. There was Paul and Barnabas, John, Luke, the different guys that went around starting these churches and moving from place to place, teaching the truths of Jesus Christ. But the way the church actually functioned was they joined together. They did synagogue on Sunday or Saturday, but then they would do church on Sunday and the rest of the week. But they would gather together not just on Sunday morning, but they would gather together for meals. They would go over to each other's homes to eat together. They would do life together. And what they would do is they would bring their neighbors into that then, because they're like, what are y'all doing? Well, come on over and find out. They would bring relatives in. And the church literally grew sort of organically as church did life together. They just sort of pulled other people in, eating together, playing together, working together, and sadly, suffering together as well as the church of Jesus Christ. Though this naturally flowed out of the Jewish religious system. For Jews, the home was the center of spiritual life. And this was true for the early church as well. The home, not the church, was the focus of spiritual care. And last week I mentioned that civilization way back then was more communal in nature. And I touched on this, but I want to go into it a little bit further because it sort of sounds horrible from our perspective. But if you go back into the Old Testament, into the book of Joshua, Moses is dead. Joshua is now commanded to lead. God tells him, go start taking the promised land back. And the very first city, which was a daunting task, was this massive city of Jericho. And God said, go take that city. And Joshua was like, yeah, okay. You know, I know we can do it. And then God says, okay, here's how you're going to do it. You're going to go march around the city for 7 days. Remember that? And then come back. And on the seventh day, you're going to march around that city, everybody, the whole community. So this is a big parade. You think the Valley City Parade's big with all of Schaefer's cars in it. This thing was massive. And they marched around the city 7 times. They blew on trumpets, screamed and shouted, and the walls of Jericho came falling down. What an incredible victory. And God said, okay, first fruits are always mine. First fruits are mine. And he said, that's going to be your first fruits of the promised land, so utterly destroy everything in Jericho. Don't keep any animals, camels, donkeys, goats, doesn't matter. You kill it all, women, men, children. The only ones that survive are the prostitute who watched the spies. They were the only ones saved. Everything else was to be destroyed in this city to get rid of the evil that existed in this city. Well, the next day they wake up and they decide, well, God says, okay, well, they knew they need to go to this next city and take this next city. It was a small little city. Chapter 7 starts out with, but Israel sinned. The nation of Israel sinned against the Lord. So they went to march against this tiny little city, and they got their heinies whipped. I mean, their good soldiers got killed. They got a spanking in the city. They came home, and they're like, what in the world happened? And then God comes and he says, well, you sinned against me. And they're like, what? What did we do? And God said, everything in Jericho was mine, and you kept some back. Joshua was mortified. He falls to the ground, tears his robes, cries out before God. I didn't know this. And so God, this needs rectified. And so Joshua orders all the clans of Israel to come up one by one. And then each place was a lot. They used a lot, and nope, that family's clean. That family's clean. Then they came to the clan. This clan was dirty. And so then family by family in that clan, they came up. And finally this man, Achan, came before the Lord. And the lot, I don't even think got thrown. He fell down before it happened. And he said, I'm the one who sinned. I saw a beautiful robe of the Babylonians. And I thought, nobody will miss it. I kept it for myself. And then I found some silver and I found some gold. And so I scooped that up. And I just took it and I hid it in the earth. I hid it in the ground, the dirt, inside my tent. And then Joshua does this really interesting, weird, odd thing. He calls out his entire family, Achan's wife, his children. He calls out his donkeys, his camels, his cattle, anything that he has, his tent, all of his belongings. They threw it into a valley and they stoned it all to death. Now, how would you like to have been Achan's wife? You did what? And we scratch our heads and we think, man, this is weird, because we live in an individualized community. They didn't. The community rose and fell together. We see that because they rose as they beat Jericho. They fell as soldiers. So think about that. Some other wives' husbands were killed at this other battle. Why? Because of your husband's sin. And so the whole family is put to death because of one man's sin. The idea or the concept is Achan is the head of his household. And if Achan is evil, his household is going to be evil as well. And so there goes the kids, there goes the wife, there goes the animals, there goes everything of Achan. I think we need to be reminded that religion started communally. And I still think the best way that religion should happen, spirituality should happen, is not in the church. But what happened in the Middle Ages is, as we set up this Shakespearean theater, we started to have experts in the church. One of the things that I personally revolt against, I just don't care for, is mega churches when they hire everything done in the church. I don't think that's the way a church should be ran. Now, there's some key things you probably need to hire some expertise in, but most of the work of the church should be done by the church. It should be done by us. The teaching the Sunday school, the taking care of the buildings, the getting involved in outreach stuff, that we should do that together as a community of believers together. And I think that reflects also on the family. So when the church became professional, all of a sudden the family said, hey, we'll just let the professionals take care of our children, and we'll let them raise them and teach them all the spirituality that they need to know. Now, if you grew up Catholic, did your parents teach you a lot, or did you get forced a lot by catechism? Isn't it catechism? Is that what it was? Yeah, you went to old catechism because that's where you got taught all this stuff. And it was the priest's role to teach you, not necessarily your mommy and daddy's. And I don't think, personally, that's a great biblical system. I think it is the father's responsibility to run the reins of his family spiritually. I think the dad, the husband, should take charge spiritually of the home. Along the way, when we let the church take over the children and raising the children, the husbands also decided to check out, and they left it all to the ladies. We'll just let the ladies run the spiritual stuff. We don't do that. And I think that's wrong. I think the spiritual leader of the house should be the father, the husband, the dad. And then the mother begins to also overreign with the children. And the center of religion should happen in the home. And so what would happen in a synagogue is we'd come together, we'd have this discussion, and ladies, you wouldn't be involved, and the children wouldn't necessarily be involved in these discussions as much. But then dads, you would be responsible to go home and teach these things, teach the Torah to your children. And if you failed in doing that, you failed your family, and your children would not know the ways of the Lord. And therefore, Achan sinned. He probably wasn't doing well at his family. His whole family was sinners, and they all went down together. I think families, that's where the center of spiritual training should happen, not in Stephanie's Sunday school and children's church. It should be happening in your house. How many of you families know what Stephanie's teaching in junior church? You sure should. You should ask. You should get involved. You should at least know so you can reinforce what's happening there. That's where the center of spiritual life should happen, is in the home. So dads would go home after synagogue, and they would sit down, and they would start to teach their kids the truths of Jesus Christ. When people come to me and ask, I'd like my child baptized, I'll call it baptism. I'll call it, it's really dedication. But one of the things that I emphasize, we cling to that verse. Train up a child in the way that he should go, and when he is old, he should not depart. And most people have the idea in their mind that that means take them to church. Take them to church, and when they're old, they'll be good little Christians. It won't work. Not if you live like hell yourself. The responsibility to train up a child doesn't happen at church, it happens at the home. And when you dedicate this child, when you baptize this child, that child is so young, God's going to take him to heaven if they die. I fully believe in the grace of God. But that child, as it raises, is going to have a lot higher chance of being in church and following Jesus Christ if you, mom and dad, show up in church yourself and actually practice what you hear on Sunday morning, day to day. That child's probably going to raise and become a Christian. Chances are. Just saying. That's why we do dedication. The last thing I want to emphasize this morning is Christ in the middle. Have you ever heard the axiom that a family that plays together stays together? In some form, a family that camps together stays together, a family that suffers together stays together, a family that goes through trials together stays together. For years, we've always eaten together as a family. I'm a bit of a stickler on that in our house. We sit down where do we sit to have supper, my family? Erica, Tim, Caleb, Michelle. Where does Dad insist we have supper? The dinner table, not the TV, not the bedroom. We sit at the dinner table. Michelle's like, come on, can't we? No, you all go watch television. I'm going to sit at the dinner table because that's the proper place to eat. And growing up, we would sit around the dinner table, no cell phones allowed. If the cell phone rings, you can hang it up. You don't need to answer it. It's not a beckoning call that's going to, somebody's going to die because you didn't answer the cell phone during dinner. We're going to sit, even if it's for 10 minutes, and we're going to have life together. We're going to have dinner together, and then we'll go about our lives. So we eat at the dinner table. Even today, Eric and Tim, they're back with us. Kayla's back, and we still sit down. About 8 out of 10 meals, we're going to sit down, evening meals, we're going to sit down at the dinner table together. There's something about doing life together, about doing a meal together. If the kids weren't with me, I would still want to sit down at the dinner table with just Michelle and myself, just to debrief a little bit and hang out a little bit together. There's something about sharing a meal together. Every year, we do this for about a month during the holiday season. We look forward to those gatherings called Thanksgiving and Christmas dinners where we sit together with our extended family and we just catch up together. We just hang out for a little while as we eat, and then we groan about eating too much. From time to time, you folks do it. You get together, you go to a restaurant together, you go over to somebody's house and you have dinner together. Like our couples group, we go to the coffee shop and we do small group at the coffee shop. So we're eating and munching and drinking some coffee together. So we practice that together, even at a local restaurant. One of my pet peeves, just really quick, this is a sideline bonus, extra point, freebie if you want. If you go out to lunch after Sunday morning, you doggone tip well. They know you came from church, And if you Scrooge them on the tip, you just said Jesus Christ and Christians are Scrooges. So if you're going to go out to eat after church and you didn't change your clothes and put on, junky clothes, and there's going to be any hint that you just came from church, you tip that waitress well. Because too many Christians rip those waitresses off after church because I gave all my money to Jesus. What a bad example for the community. Okay, so I'm sorry, that's a bonus. You don't have to pay for that one. All right. So we get together and we sit down and we eat together because it brings us together. As you go through the pages of the Gospels, one of the things that just strikes me is how often Jesus was eating. You ever notice that? Two places I've noticed that. Any of you watch the Oceans movies, Oceans 11, Oceans 10, Oceans? You notice the one guy always is eating. Every scene he's eating. But as I read through the Gospels, it seems like every time I turn around, they're eating. They're going to somebody's house for dinner. At one time, Luke 19 records this one, they went over to a trader's house, to Zacchaeus' house, and they had dinner at Zacchaeus' house, and everybody's, he's eating with sinners. And Zacchaeus comes to know Jesus and becomes a follower, and his whole family says, I'll give back, double what I've stolen and half of what I own to the poor. He really becomes a follower of Jesus Christ. At other times, Jesus ate out in the open. He ate just in the fields. A couple times he ate in the fields, and he was the one feeding. He multiplied the fish and the loaves. We see Jesus again. He dies. He comes back to life. This is a lot of stuff. And what do we see Jesus doing right after he comes back? He's preparing a meal. He's cooking some fish over an open fire as the disciples are out fishing on the lake. He's eating again. Come on up. Let's have breakfast together. And it's interesting. Eating is going on a lot in the Scriptures. And I think there's a reason for that. There's something about breaking bread, eating together, that pulls us together, that causes us to stop a little bit, to talk a little bit, to catch up a little bit. It shouldn't surprise us then that the night before the biggest day and evening of Jesus' life, he was eating. They were doing the Passover meal. This is very much like our Thanksgiving. The Passover and Thanksgiving are very similar. The Passover was a remembrance of when the death angel passed over the nation of Israel, wiped out the firstborn of all the Egyptians, and that was the reason Israel got chased out of Egypt and became its own nation, was able to do the Joshua thing and take back the promised land. And so they would have this commemorative meal called Passover in which they commemorated that night in their history. It was like a Thanksgiving meal. It was specially prepared with particular trimmings done a particular way, just like our turkeys and our green beans and our casseroles and our macaroni and cheese and pumpkin pie for Thanksgiving. Well, at the end of this meal, Jesus then instructed that his church should do this often. They should share a meal, and it was going to be this special meal. And then he laid out what it was to be. Let's look at this. Matthew chapter 26, verse 26 through 30. If you have your Bibles, you can follow along. While they were eating, Jesus took bread, and when he had given thanks, he broke it, and he gave it to his disciples, saying, "Take and eat. This is my body." And then he took the cup, and when he had given thanks, he gave it to them, saying, "Drink from it, all of you. This is my blood of the covenant, which is poured out for many for the forgiveness of sins. I tell you, I will not drink from the fruit of the vine from now on until the day when I drink it anew with you in my Father's kingdom." And when they had sung a hymn, they went out to the Mount of Olives. I love all the connotations that are involved in communion and Jesus bringing communion to the church. In this one act, there's so many lessons, so many principles, so many ideas for us to live by. So let's just zero in on a couple truths here this morning for communion. It reminds us that we are family because family eats together. Family does life together. And every time we take communion, we're eating together. We're doing life together. We're breaking bread together. Sharing a meal is something that brings the family together, and so should communion. It brings us together. And through this communion, we're also reminded what makes us family is not a legal contract. It's not an adoption. It's not a birthright. We weren't born Christians. This meal reminds us that it's through Jesus Christ that we are one. And I like sitting in the round this morning, or sort of the semicircle, CU, whatever you want to call it, sitting in this sort of fashion. Because what's interesting about this is with Jesus in the middle, it reminds me that when I look across to Rich, I have to look through who? And when Carol looks at Eric, who does Carol have to look through? And when Steve looks at Ray, who does Steve have to look through to see Ray? Got it? Isn't this an awesome reminder in the church? That when I look at anybody in my church family, I need to look at them through Jesus Christ. That's what makes us one. Not this building, not my surrender to Jesus and my, ooh, I believe in him. No, it's Jesus that makes us one. Now, I don't know about you, but does your family ever drive you nuts? Do they get on your nerves a little bit? Sometimes? Somebody you know? You know, the reality is, if we are a family at the church, we're going to drive each other nuts every now and then, right? It's going to happen. We're not all me. Yeah, I'd probably drive myself nuts, so that wouldn't even work either, you know. We're going to get on each other's nerves from time to time. We're going to ruffle each other's feathers, not intentionally, it just happens. But here's something we need to keep in mind, and every time we take communion, we should be reminded of this. Even if so-and-so gets on my nerves, I need to look at them through Jesus Christ. And how would Jesus look at them? Well, Jesus looks at me with forgiveness, with love, with compassion. I know that I get on Jesus' nerves, and he doesn't chew me out all the time. He may correct me, but he doesn't chew me out. He doesn't cast me out of his family. And so when I look at other people in the church, even if they're driving me nuts, I need to look at them through the eyes of Jesus Christ, because he is what makes us one. I think what Jesus did in giving us communion the way that he did, setting it with the Passover meal, this huge tradition, and then saying this is a foundational rite that I want the church to participate in often. I want you to do this a lot. I think there was great reason as to why he did this, why he established this for the church. It not only reminds us of what he did by giving us his blood and giving us his body and by being physically present on this earth. It doesn't just remind us of him. It also reminds us that he is the center of all that we do, and every relationship that I have in my life, and especially within the church, it needs to go through Jesus Christ. And so this morning, I invite you to the dinner table called communion. Whether you're a house guest or whether you're a family member here, I want to invite you to this table. I want you to share this meal with us this morning as we remember what Jesus did, but also as we are reminded Jesus is the center of all that we do. Let's bless these elements. Dear Father, as we come to this table this morning, I ask your blessing to fall upon these wafers, that they will be a true reminder of your body that was given to us, that you were physically present on this earth. And as that wafer fills our mouth with its flavor, may it remind us fully of your presence. But I also ask your blessing upon the juice that we have before us this morning, that it'll be a reminder of your blood that was shed for us, that it'll remind us of the sacrifice that you made so that we could be forgiven. The penalty of sin is going to happen to every one of us. One penalty will never be taken away, that's death, except for those that are raptured. So death is part of that penalty. But we're told over and over again in the New Testament there's a second death that's even worse. There's a spiritual death. And Jesus, you came, you died, you gave us your blood, you became that sacrifice, that blood sacrifice, so that we would not have to suffer that second death penalty, that spiritual death. You came to bring us alive, to bring us forgiveness. The bill had to be paid, so you took the sacrifice. You sacrificed and took the punishment. And it was through your blood that we are redeemed. And so I ask your blessing upon the elements of the juice this morning, that it'll remind us of your sacrifice of your blood shed for us, for our sin. Amen. If you will, just take a wafer. They are gluten-free wafers. And just pass it on down around to you. Hold it. We'll take this together. Somewhere this will collide, but just be careful. Take the juice as well. We're family. Just get it passed around. It's okay, these. Everybody got a wafer? As a family together, Jesus passed around a loaf of bread. It was unleavened bread because it was Passover. And he said, take and eat and remember my body that was given for you. Let's take and eat of the wafer. Just a moment of prayer. Spend it with Jesus here for just a moment. Tell him thank you yourself. Similar fashion, he took his cup, probably passed it around the table, said, drink in remembrance of my blood shed for you. Take of the juice. As you do so, tell Jesus thank you for his blood. Jesus, thank you for instituting this wonderful thing called communion, this great rite of the church. Thank you that it reminds us that you are the center of everything that we do. If you're not center, then we're not a church. And so you're the center of my relationships. You're the center of my focus on my brothers and my sisters. You're the center of my salvation. And rightfully, you should be the center of my world as I serve you as Lord of all. May you be glorified. May you be honored. May you be Lord of my life completely. And may I honor you through all that I do as I live and I breathe. Thank you for this rite, this communion, and this moment this morning to share it with my LifeSpring family. Amen. I want to invite you to stand. After communion, they sang a hymn and they went out to the Mount of Olives. And oftentimes was the way they would end synagogue, is they would share together and they would sing a hymn and they would mingle and head out of the synagogue to go about the rest of their week. So we're going to sing a final song this morning together. Great hymn of the church. Let's sing it out. Sing it to Jesus this morning.
The King of creation. Oh, my soul, praise him, for he is my health and salvation. All ye who hear, now to his temple draw near. Join me in glad adoration. So wondrously rated, shelters us under his wings, yea, so gently sustained. Have you not seen how your desires have been granted in what he ordained? Unfold like flowers before thee, opening to the Son above. Joyful, joyful, we adore thee, praise to the Lord. Oh, let all that is in me adore Him. All that has life and breath come now with praises before Him. Let the Amen sound from His people again. Gladly forever adore Him. Amen. Sound from His people again. Gladly forever adore Him.
And as they sang a song, a hymn, they dismissed. So you're dismissed this morning. Thank you for coming to synagogue. You're dismissed. Have a great week.